Are you wondering how to get the best video quality out of the GoPro Hero 13 Black? After doing several comparison videos to other popular action cameras, and using this camera to help my partner record content for his new commentary YouTube channel, we've come up with the best settings for the GoPro Hero 13 Black, and in this video I'm going to share them with you. But first, we'll start by walking through the GoPro Basic interface, and also deep diving into presets and Pro mode, which allow you to customize your GoPro to your liking. Now, most of this video will focus on the video mode settings, but I will also go over the photo mode and time-lapse mode later on in this video. There is a lot to unpack in this video, so feel free to use the start and stop buttons to pause or play back the recordings, or use the timestamps to navigate to the sections that you find most interesting. Now, when you first unbox the camera, it's important to do a firmware update to make sure that you have access to the latest features. There are two ways to do this, but in both cases, make sure that you've got at least a half-charged battery. The first way is to install the GoPro Quick app onto your phone and connect the GoPro to the app via Wi-Fi. And then you'll automatically be prompted to install the firmware update. Or you can do it manually by going to the GoPro website, downloading the firmware, and dragging and dropping it to a memory card that you then insert into the camera. So first, let's start by pressing the power button on the side of the camera below the model number. In case you're unfamiliar with GoPros, here's what the interface looks like. It's more or less the same interface that you'll find on the GoPro Hero 12, but there are a few differences here in the GoPro Hero 13. But it is quite different from the GoPro Hero 10 and 11, and I have dedicated settings videos for those GoPros if you're interested. You can swap between shooting modes by simply swiping left and right to go from photo to video to time-lapse modes. And you can also swipe up at any time to preview any footage that you've shot. Now, before we go any further, you want to go over to the side of the camera and pop up the battery door. And next to the battery, make sure that you have a micro SD card inserted into the memory card slot. And I don't know about you, but I have tons of these little memory cards lying around. As a content creator, staying organized is essential, especially when managing multiple YouTube channels. Now, my main focus is filming travel vlogs and tech tutorials, while my partner uses the GoPro Hero 13 to capture content for his new commentary and walking tour channel. Now, with 3 YouTube channels between us, the volume of footage, editing deadlines, and daily tasks can get overwhelming fast. So we've been looking for a way to fine-tune our project management, everything from planning shoots to editing and releasing content. That's when we came across today's video sponsor, ClickUp. ClickUp has helped us create a seamless workflow that keeps every detail in check, letting us focus more on creativity rather than juggling the daily tasks. If you're a filmmaker or a photographer looking to streamline your content creation process, then let's take a look to see how ClickUp can help you achieve the same organization and efficiency that we've experienced. ClickUp is an online productivity tool that can replace all of your to-do list, reminders, and calendar apps. You can create folders for all of your projects, and also drag and drop checklist boards, collaborate with partners, set recurring reminders, track your time on various tasks, manage calendars, and leverage a whole suite of productivity tools and templates that were created by experts. I especially love that it's easy to create multiple projects. In our case, each of our YouTube channels is its own project, and within it, each video idea becomes a task that can be dragged and dropped to easily see their statuses, and also be assigned to the person in charge. I can also set deadlines for tasks, and see everything in list mode, so I can see all of the important details at a glance, or in calendar view, so I can visualize all of my upcoming deadlines and plan ahead accordingly. If you're ready to take control of your content creation pipeline, then give ClickUp a try today for free. And as a special offer, when you sign up through our link, you'll get an email with a special discount on a paid tier if you plan to upgrade. Use my link in the video description below to try ClickUp for free. Thank you, ClickUp, for sponsoring this video. And now let's deep dive into the GoPro Hero 13 settings. When you first turn on the camera or do a factory reset, the camera is by default on easy mode. Now, like its name implies, easy mode simplifies the main shooting interface by hiding a lot of detailed settings. This is best for those of you who simply want to get up and running quickly and not fuss too much with many of the settings. But before I show you how to operate the camera in easy mode, let me show you how to get in and out of it. Swipe down, swipe left, and go to Controls. When you tap on it, you can see that you can go between easy or pro mode. For now, we're going to stick with easy mode before we go over to pro mode. So within easy mode, you can tap on standard video here, and you'll see that you can choose between standard or HDR. You can also change your quality from standard or 4K up to highest, which is 5.3K, or basic, which is 1080p. You can also choose your framing. So you can go from widescreen, which is 16:9, to vertical, to full frame, which is 8:7. I'll talk more about shooting an 8:7 aspect ratio later on in this video, but just note here that if you shoot an 8:7, then your digital lens is restricted to only shooting in wide. You'll also probably want to crop your video in post-production if you shoot an 8:7. More information on shooting an 8:7 later on in this video, but generally I shoot in 4K widescreen in standard color. You can also choose your digital lens or your field of view, with hyperview being the widest, and linear with horizon lock being the most narrow with the least distortion. And finally, you can choose your frame rate, with 30 frames per second being your normal speed video. 60 frames per second can also be normal speed, or you can slow it down by 2 times. And 120 frames per second is your 4 times slow motion video. And 240 frames per second is your ultra slow motion. But this is capped at 2.7K resolution. And those are all of the settings you can access in easy mode. But from the main screen, let's swipe down, then swipe left, and hit controls, and go over to pro mode, because if you're taking the time to watch this video, you might as well learn to use the pro mode to unlock more settings and presets. Now from here, I'll go over the presets. Make sure that your camera is set to pro mode in order to see all the presets. And when you back out of the main screen, your presets are right here. Now presets are available for photo mode, video mode, and time-lapse mode. But we'll start by talking about video mode presets first. So from here, if you want to tap into the settings, you can tap on this icon to the side, or you can tap on this one to see your existing presets, and then tap on the gear icon here to dig into settings. And you'll see by default that there are 2 presets already here, video and burst slow motion. I'll go over burst slow motion later. Let's start with the video settings first. And also later on, I'll show you the exact presets that I have set up in my camera. But first, I'll walk you through all of the settings in the preset menu. First of all, we have profile or color. You can choose between standard, HDR, and log. Standard is the default and the easiest because you can upload your video as is without color grading it, while both HDR and log require post-processing. Now for HDR, you can leave it in regular HDR, or you can scroll down and turn on HLG HDR. You can turn this on if you want more professional level HDR. Now one thing to know though is that I usually have to encode my HDR footage on my computer in order for the colors to appear correct on my MacBook Pro. The other color profile here is log, which also requires color correction in order for the colors to look correct. Otherwise, everything is going to look really flat and unsaturated. But the benefit about shooting in log is that it gives you more control over the dynamic range and the colors in your shot. Now, as you're selecting different profiles, you might notice that your framings and your resolutions and other settings might be more restricted. You'll get the most flexibility when shooting in standard profile. So next up, let's talk about framing. First is 16:9, which is widescreen, and this is the one that I usually film in most of the time. But you could also choose 9:16, which is vertical. This way you can keep your camera horizontal and still shoot vertical content, or you can flip the camera on its side to also shoot in vertical. For the latter option, this also works if you have 16:9 selected, and the orientation is set to all. There's also 4:3 full screen framing, or 8:7. Which allows you to crop in at other aspect ratios, like 16:9 or even the vertical 9:16 aspect ratio. The only catch about shooting an 8:7 is that your digital lens is restricted to wide, and you're also not likely to export your final video in 8:7, so you have to plan ahead to edit that video. Now below aspect ratios are resolution. And again, they are restricted depending on the framing that you choose. But if you're shooting in 16:9, you can choose between 1080p, which is the lowest resolution, 2.7K, which is mid-range, 4K, or 5.3K, which is the maximum. Now, if you shoot in 5K, you'll end up with a really big file size that does give you the flexibility to crop into your image without losing image quality. But it takes up a lot of space on your memory card, and its usefulness is also debatable because most people are still watching media from TVs and monitors that are 4K and below. So personally, I stick with 4K or even 1080p, depending on the content that I'm shooting. Next are frame rates, which is how quickly a number of frames appears within a second. So the higher the frame rate, the slower the input. 120 frames per second is slow motion, and 240 frames per second is ultra slow motion. If you want to shoot in normal speed video, then you'll probably want to stick with 60 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 24 frames per second. I generally shoot in 30 frames per second. If you want more details on frame rates and how they affect your image quality, I have a dedicated video that deep dives into frame rates. Next, we have digital lenses, also known as field of view or FOV. Now, even though GoPros have a fixed focal length, these so-called digital lenses help you change up your framing in camera. Now, hyperview is the widest, which can be nice for shooting immersive POV content, but it has extremely warped sides, so it's best to use sparingly. The next lenses are superview and wide, which are both great for getting that POV perspective, but also at the cost of having a warped fisheye effect. But it's not quite as bad as hyperview. So if you don't want any warping on your sides, then you'll want to shoot in linear. Or better yet is linear with horizon lock, which keeps the horizon steady. This is the digital lens that I use 99% of the time. Next up, we've got Hyper Smooth, which is GoPro's built-in stabilization, which is incredibly good because you really don't need a gimbal anymore if you're using this camera in bright lighting conditions. Now, even though Hyper Smooth does a slight crop into your image, I think it's worth having on if you're doing any kind of movement with the camera. Or better yet, you can select Auto Boost, which works dynamically to slowly expand from that crop if you're walking steadily, and crop in as you become more unsteady. This is super subtle and very difficult to demonstrate, but I think it's a pretty great feature. So I pretty much always shoot in Auto Boost whenever I'm using this camera. Next up is Scheduled Capture, which does exactly what it says. You can set up a time for your camera to automatically wake up and start recording. If you want to specify how long that camera is recording, then you'll want to set that in the duration. You can choose from several increments between 15 seconds and 3 hours, or set it to no limit. Duration can be used by itself or in combination with scheduled capture. For everyday vlogging and filming, I pretty much leave these features off, but they can be really useful if you ever need your camera to auto-record and stop. The next setting is Hindsight, which lets you capture 15 to 30 seconds of video before you hit the record button. When it's enabled, the GoPro is continuously recording audio and video, but it only saves 15 to 30 seconds prior to when you hit the shutter button. So say you're waiting for action like a biker to come around a corner, and when you see that biker, that's when you typically hit the record button. In most cases, you're going to miss the full sequence of action. But if you have Hindsight enabled, it automatically includes 15 to 30 seconds of footage before you hit record. Now, the main downside to using Hindsight is that because your camera is continuously recording, it's really going to eat up your battery life. So I personally use it very sparingly. Next is the timer setting, which lets you set a 3-second or 10-second time delay after the shutter is pressed. This is ideal for selfies or group shots whenever the camera is placed far away. Now, the next section of settings is Protune, which are advanced options that directly affect how your final image looks. First up is bit depth. The default is 8-bit, but in select settings you can also enable 10-bit, which offers a greater range of colors and gives you more flexibility when editing, especially for color or contrast corrections. For example, in a bright environment, 10-bit footage can retain more details when highlights are brought down. Just keep in mind that 10-bit files do take up more space on your memory card. Next up is bitrate, which refers to the depth of information in your videos. A high bitrate means that you have a slightly higher quality video, but it also means a larger file size. So if you want to conserve space on your memory card, then choose standard bitrate. But if you want the best quality video like I do, then choose a high bitrate. Now next to that is shutter speed, which determines how long the shutter is open. Now a majority of GoPro users, myself included, just like to leave the shutter speed on auto. But if you want to shoot in so-called cinematic settings, where the shutter speed is double that of the frame rate, then you might want to choose a specific shutter speed. Just note that if you do, you'll likely have to use an ND filter to even out the lighting, and even a gimbal to get stable footage. Next up is EV comp, or exposure value compensation, which lets you set the brightness of your image. I typically leave this on 0, but if I'm outside shooting in really bright conditions, sometimes I'll leave this on -0.5. Next is white balance, which lets you set your color tones. In most cases, I think that auto is the best setting here, but sometimes if I'm shooting indoors, I might want to set my white balance manually if I want my shot to be less cool or less warm. Next is ISO minimum and maximum. ISO refers to how sensitive your camera is to available light. The higher the ISO, the brighter your image. But a higher ISO also introduces more digital noise or grain, which degrades the overall image quality. So I typically leave both of these on auto. I only mess with them if I'm shooting in so-called cinematic settings, when I'm also tweaking the shutter speed. Next is sharpness, which determines the amount of detail in your image. Now by default it's set to medium, and I think this works okay in most situations, but sometimes it's a little bit too much and exaggerates the detail in your shot. Also, you can always add sharpness in post-production, so I personally like to shoot in low sharpness most of the time, but sometimes I'll also shoot in medium, but I never ever shoot in high sharpness. Like, it's just way too much in these little cameras. Next is denoise, which lets you reduce the amount of grain or noise in your shot. I don't usually see noise in my shot unless I'm shooting in low light, so I leave this on the default of medium. Next we have color, and GoPro actually gives us 3 color choices. So by default it's on natural, which I think is where you should leave it at most of the time. But you can also select vibrant if you prefer slightly vibrant colors in your shots, maybe if you're out shooting landscapes or nature, or you can shoot in a flat color profile. Now note that flat does need to be color graded, but it doesn't allow quite as much flexibility as shooting in log. So I'd choose log if you want to color grade your footage. But most of the time, I'm just shooting in natural color. Now finally, we have GoPro audio settings. The first setting here is raw audio. So if it's enabled, you can select low, medium, or high. And this creates a separate audio file in addition to your standard video file. You only want to enable this if you plan to post-process your audio files. And for most of us, that's really above our heads. So I typically leave this setting off. Next is audio tuning, which is a brand new setting on the GoPro Hero 13. You can choose between the default of standard, or you can choose voice. This is an audio test of the GoPro Hero 12 Black using standard audio with the built-in internal microphones. This is what it sounds like. Audio is unedited, straight at a camera. I'm standing an arm's length away from the camera. Now I've enabled the new voice mode on the GoPro Hero 13 Blacks. This is what it sounds like using those built-in internal microphones, arm's length away, using the Hero 13 Black, and audio is unedited. Now if I'm vlogging, I'll usually use voice, but it only applies if I'm using the internal microphones. Wind reduction is next. This can filter out excessive wind noise if you're using the GoPro internal mics or the media mod. I usually leave this on auto. Finally is the media mod settings, which are grayed out if you don't have the media mod attached. Now if you don't know, the media mod is purchased separately, and it includes a built-in microphone and 2 ports that are missing on the naked GoPro. A 3.5mm microphone jack, and also a micro HDMI port. So if you want to attach your own external microphone that doesn't have Bluetooth, then you have to use the media mod. I'll explain more about how to connect a Bluetooth microphone in another section of this video. But with the media mod, you can also just use the built-in media mod microphones. And this setting lets you enable either the front mic, back mic, both microphones, or turn off the media mod microphones completely and just use the GoPro internal microphones. So if you use GoPros along with the media mod, I've got some good news. The Hero 13 Black is compatible with that media mod that exists for the Hero 9, 10, 11, 12, and now 13. And so now I've got the Hero 13 Black inside of the media mod. We are recording using the media mod's built-in microphone. I'm standing in front of it. This is what it sounds like. And standing behind the GoPro inside of the media mod, this is what it sounds like using that built-in microphone on the media mod. Next, we've got shortcuts. So back out on the main screen, you'll notice 4 icons that can be set to specific features that you want to access quickly. For me, those are digital lens, settings, sharpness, and timer. Finally, on the very bottom of the screen is a yellow button that says Restore. You can select this if you want the settings in this preset to go back to their defaults. Or you can tap the blue Save As button, and you can choose a custom name for your preset. So there are some in here already, like Air, Bike, Epic, Indoor, Motor, Mounted, FOV or POV, Selfie, Skate, etc. But you can also create your own custom name. The ability to create a custom name in camera is brand new on the Hero 13. So as promised, I want to go over my custom presets here. You can see that I have quite a few of them in here. So let's start at the very top. The first one is action. So whenever I'm shooting action mode, these are the settings that I have. I usually shoot in standard, 16:9, 4K, 60 frames per second, and hyperview, which is the widest POV style lens that I can shoot with. I also have auto boost on. And pretty much all of these settings are off. And for Protune, 10-bit bitrate high, shutter speed auto. Pretty much everything else in here is auto. The only thing that I'll change is, again, sharpness being low, color natural, and auto tuning to voice. So those are the basic settings that are going to be true for all of these presets here, just with a few tweaks here and there. For slow motion, so I'll be shooting in standard 16:9, 4K, and actually this is wrong. Rather than 60, I'll have this to 120 frames per second, and also linear with horizon leveling. Auto boost, everything here off, 10-bit bitrate high, low sharpness, everything else is pretty much the same here. Now Cine is one that is a little controversial because not everyone wants to shoot in so-called cinematic settings, or when you do this, I'll explain later. So first of all, framing 16:9, 4K, 60 frames per second, linear with horizon lock, auto boost hyper smooth. And what's different about this setting is that I'll have my shutter speed, instead of being on auto, I'll have it on 1/120th of a second, which is double that of the frame rate. So this technically is a cinematic setting or shutter speed, but I don't always shoot this way. If you do shoot this way, you do have to usually use an ND filter, because this typically means that your shot is going to be really, really blown out, like way too bright. And you may also need to use a gimbal, because that also means that even though you're shooting an auto boost hyper smooth, your shot may still be a little shaky. So again, this is technically cinematic settings, but I don't usually shoot this way. I only do this if I, absolutely need to, like for a client shoot or something, and they specify that they want this style. Next up, we have night mode. So again, most of these settings are going to be pretty similar, but I actually like to shoot in HLG HDR for night mode. The GoPro is really not that great at shooting in low light or at night, so I don't really recommend doing it. Like, if you can help it, I actually think most cell phones shoot better in low light than the GoPro does. But if you, want to try your hand at it, I recommend shooting in an HLG HDR color profile, because I do think that it does help it a little bit. But yeah, everything else 16:9, 4K, 30 frames per second, linear with horizon lock, auto boost, and everything here off. Protune, bitrate high. You are locked into 10-bit if you are shooting in HLG HDR. And sharpness low. Denoise, definitely have that on high. So I actually have two vlogging presets. I have one high resolution vlog. So for this one, we do shoot in log whenever we can with this camera, because I do think that if I'm shooting my face, it just makes my face look a lot better, personally speaking. So yeah, I will shoot in log, 16:9, 4K, 30 frames per second, linear with horizon lock, auto boost. You guys know the drill. And everything else here, I don't really touch. The only thing I will change is sharpness being low. So I do like to shoot log whenever I can, but, as I've said before in other videos, we do have a third channel that my partner Martin is spearheading. And so for him, his videos on that channel are really, really long, like they're averaging 40 minutes to an hour long. And so when he's recording for that long, we've decided that it's not worth us shooting in 4K, because it just takes way too long to edit, to upload, to process, all of that. So he actually, prefers to shoot standard color, 16:9, and in 1080p, 30 frames per second. We would actually like to shoot log, but as you can see, doing that, you can only do it in 4K or 5K. So he needs to shoot in standard if he wants to do 1080. Digital lenses, again, linear with horizon lock, auto boost, bitrate high, sharpness low. We're kind of experimenting with this. Sometimes sharpness is a little too low for what he's shooting, so sometimes he'll put this on medium. But the other thing is here in color. So you can actually shoot in flat, and even though this is not as good as shooting in log, it, in our opinion, is still better than shooting in GoPro colors, because this still makes your sharpness a little bit lower, and you can still color grade this footage just with less flexibility than when shooting a log. So this is what he's going to start doing for his low resolution vlogging on his third channel, which is called Gemini Walk and Talk, if you want to check that one out. So last setting here, this is just a default setting. I don't actually know how to change this video. I don't really want that. This video setting is what I would call my high resolution vlogging setting, and I'm honestly not sure how to delete it. But the last setting in here is the burst slow motion. So this is a default preset that comes on your camera, and using this, you can get ultra, ultra, ultra slow motion. You can do, 5K, 120 frames per second. Previously, it's, 4K 120. So if you want high resolution 5K 120 in a wide field of view, you can do that here. You can also do 900p 360 frames per second or 720p 400 frames per second. Now the thing though, if you do use these burst slow motions, you are capped at a shorter duration of shooting, and also your resolution tends to go down, and you're restricted in terms of the fields of view you can select in the camera. Now before I go into photo and time-lapse mode settings, let's talk about general settings. So if you swipe down, you'll notice 8 icons here. Starting with the upper left corner, we have voice control. This is useful for controlling the camera from afar, with voice commands like GoPro start recording or GoPro take a picture. Now to see the full list of commands, swipe left, tap Preferences, and go to Voice Control. And here are all of the commands that you can use to control the GoPro if you have this enabled. Next to that are camera beeps, which again can be useful if you're controlling your camera from afar. I don't really use this feature, so I like to have it off because I actually find it kind of annoying. But if you do want to have the camera beeps on, if you long press on the icon, you can select the volume control to be low, medium, or high. Next is screensaver, which can display an image on the screen if the camera is idle for a long period of time. I also turn this off, but if you want to use it and you want to modify how long it takes for the screensaver to kick in, you can tap and hold the icon and pick the screensaver time. Next is screen lock. So if you have this enabled, you have to slide to unlock, which basically helps prevent you from accidentally changing any settings on your camera. But I tend to leave this feature off. Now in the bottom row, we've got front display, where you can turn the front display off, show status only, show the actual screen, or show the full screen. I like to have my front display set to actual screen so I can see everything in my frame from the front of the screen. Next is orientation. You can have it locked or set to all. If you have it set to all, the front and rear displays will move when the camera moves, which can be helpful if you're shooting vertical content or you have the camera mounted upside down. But I personally find this feature pretty annoying, so I like to have it locked. Next we have LED light control. Now if it's on, you'll see the front and back LED lights blink red when recording. You can also toggle them off in this section. You can also tap and hold the icon if you want to specify whether the back LED light is only on or all the lights are on. Not really sure why you can't select front light on only. Finally, we have a lens attachment, which is a new feature on the Hero 13. So there were a bunch of GoPro lenses and ND filters that were released alongside the Hero 13. You have to purchase them separately, but one of their main strengths is that when you attach them to the front of the camera, they are auto-detected, so you don't have to manually change any settings. Now this is the area where you likely want to leave it on the default of auto detect. But if for some reason you want to manually tell the camera which lens or filter is attached, you can do that here too. Now let's swipe right, and here you'll find details on your micro SD memory card that's inserted into your camera. You can see how much space is used, with an emphasis on what has and has not been uploaded to the GoPro Cloud. Now to me, the GoPro Cloud is actually one of the biggest unique perks of using a GoPro. If you have a GoPro subscription, you get unlimited cloud storage of GoPro footage. Or for double the price, you can also get 500 gigs of storage for non-GoPro footage too. If you have this service, you can also enable auto upload by swiping left twice, tapping on Preferences, Cloud Upload, and then turning on auto upload, so your footage is automatically uploaded to the GoPro Cloud when the camera is plugged into charge and connected to Wi-Fi. But back to the storage area, you can also tap to start a manual cloud upload. You can also tap on Manage SD card if you want to erase parts of your SD card. Now if you want to connect a Bluetooth device, like a GoPro remote or a wireless microphone like the DJI Mic 2, then from here, you want to swipe left twice, and go over to Pair Device. You'll have to make sure that wireless connections is turned on, but once it's turned on, you want to turn on the device that you want to connect. Put it into pairing mode, and tap on the device once your camera sees it. Now we can see that the microphone is indeed paired, and out here, we even have audio levels on the bottom to verify that the microphone is indeed connected. Now if I'm not pairing a Bluetooth device, then I typically want to turn off my wireless connections in order to save my battery life. But one problem with using a Bluetooth connected microphone like the DJI Mic 2 on the GoPro is that I believe that the audio quality is slightly degraded. So if we want to avoid that, then we want to pair an external microphone in a different way. Also, you can't enable internal recording when you connect the DJI Mic 2 via Bluetooth to a non-DJI camera. So if you want the best audio quality, you typically have to use the media mod, which I mentioned earlier. So to do that, we just insert the camera into the media mod, first take the door off, put it inside, and shut the door on this side. Now you see that you have the internal microphones or the media mod microphones that you could use, or the media mod now gives you 2 extra ports. Gives you the 3.5mm microphone jack, or a micro HDMI port, and USB-C port. So if we have a microphone, such as this is a Sennheiser shotgun microphone, we can plug that in, put it on top. Or what I like to do is use the DJI Mic 2 kit, which has the receiver and also the DJI Mic 2 transmitter that is paired to the receiver. So we cannot use this USB-C adapter, unfortunately. We're going to have to use the cable. So attach the 3.5mm cable to the DJI Mic 2 receiver, attach the receiver itself to the cold shoe of the media mod, and then plug the other side into the 3.5mm cable on the media mod. Now if we power everything on, we can connect the microphone this way, and let's hear the audio quality difference now. Actually, one more thing I forgot to do. So swipe down, swipe left, hit preferences, go to audio, and then go to external mics. So here, you're going to want to specify what kind of external mic you have connected to the media mod. Standard would be something without a battery, such as this Sennheiser shotgun mic. But in this case, since we're using a microphone with a battery, we want to specify powered mic. So now we're filming with the GoPro Hero 13 Black inside the media mod with the DJI Mic 2 transmitter connected to the camera. This is what it sounds like. I don't know about you guys, but I noticed that there is definitely an audio quality difference if I connect the microphone this way rather than via Bluetooth. And best of all, we can also enable internal recording on the DJI Mic 2 transmitter this way. So yeah, overall, this is just a better way to use an external microphone with the GoPro. So there are a couple more preferences I want to go over here. Swipe down, preferences. The first one is GPS. So GPS is something that was taken off of the Hero 12, but it makes its debut back on the Hero 13. So you can have it on if you want to use overlays like stickers or GPS data. This is something that you can do by attaching the GoPro to the Quick app on your phone and selecting the media tab, choosing the clip that you want to edit, click the edit button, which looks like a pencil, and the bottom left, swipe right, and select stickers. And now you can choose a sticker like a speedometer and move it to the desired location. But GPS does take up some battery life, so I typically leave this off unless I'm planning to use the GPS stickers later in post-production. And the other feature I like to toggle on here is over in the general settings. I like to turn quick capture on. I like this feature because when my GoPro is off, I can simply press the record button to wake up the camera and automatically start recording. And new on the Hero 13, you finally have the option to keep the camera on after you stop recording in quick capture mode. On older GoPros, the camera always automatically powered off after you stopped recording in quick capture, but that's no longer the case on this camera. Now typically I don't use action cameras to take photos, but it is an option in case it's something that you want to do. So back out in this menu, we can swipe to go to photo mode. And here are the settings. So again, we have some presets here that you can play around with, photo, burst, and night photo. But here are the main kind of icons that we're seeing here. So let's dive into the settings. First of all, we have digital lenses. So you only have two to choose from here. You can do linear or wide. I prefer linear because that gives you a more natural looking shot. But you can also do wide if you want to capture more in your scene, but it does give you a lot more distortion on the sides. Next we have output. So you can choose standard, which gives you a JPEG file. You can do raw, which gives you a JPEG plus a raw file. Or you can do HDR or super photo, which automatically selects the best image processing for a photo based on the scene. Now I typically like to shoot raw because I want to have more creative control over my image, but one restriction is that you can only choose a wide digital lens when shooting in raw. So typically I am shooting in standard photo if I want to shoot in linear. But anyway, the next setting in here is interval, which is how often the camera takes a photo. You can turn it off, or you can have it go 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, all the way up to 120 seconds for the interval. This is best used in combination with duration. So you have to have some interval selected, but now you can do duration. So how long the camera is going to be recording before it stops. So in these settings, the camera would take a photo every 1 second for 5 minutes. Next is scheduled capture, which I talked about in the video section, but here you can specify a certain time and date when you want the camera to start shooting. Next we have timer, which lets you choose a 3-second or 10-second delay. This is really good for selfies or group shots. And then we have zoom. So there's very limited zoom on this camera, but you can go up to 2 times zoom by using this little toggle here. Finally, we have Protune. Now I explained most of these settings in the video Protune section, but in short, I leave pretty much everything on auto or default. The only one that I'll change is sharpness. A lot of times I'll make this low rather than medium. And sometimes I'll also change the color to vibrant if I'm shooting a landscape. But this is definitely to taste. So next we have a couple of photo presets here. The first one is burst, which does exactly what it says it does. It'll shoot a bunch of photos in a row. So first of all, choose your digital lens. I would choose linear. You can choose your output to be standard or raw. And here's the big part here. You have your burst rate. So your GoPro, if it's set to auto, it'll capture up to 30 photos in 1 second based on your lighting conditions, but you can also tell it, a manual interval here. So 60 photos in a 10-second burst, or 30 photos in a 1 second burst. You can choose anything in between. But I typically have this on auto, unless I have a specific amount of photos in mind. But this could be really great for, if you don't have someone to shoot photos for you, you could do something like this. If you want to make GIFs, this would be another great way to use this feature. You may also want to use the schedule capture or the timer or the voice control in conjunction with it. And the last preset we have here for photo mode is night photo. So going in here, you can again choose your digital lens. I may actually do wide for this depending on what it is that I'm photographing, but yeah, you can choose that. You can choose your output, standard or raw. I would actually choose raw in this case. And if you do that, again, you are restricted to a wide digital lens. And schedule capture, you can choose that as well. But your timer, you can have this, off for 3 seconds. I would have this to 3 seconds at least. Again, because when you do press that shutter button, it often does shake your camera a little bit. So this would eliminate that. And here we have, some automatic settings in here. We have your ISO minimum at 100, ISO max at 800. Sharpness, I would bring this down to low. Denoise on high. Color on natural. But yeah, you want to use this setting if you're going to take photos in the dark or low light situations. And if you do, you don't want to handhold the camera. You definitely want to plant it down on a flat surface or on a tripod. Finally, let's go over time-lapse mode. So GoPro has great presets here, especially in the night effects mode. I think it's actually one of their biggest advantage over competing action cameras. Now the first setting is time warp, which is where hypersmooth is applied to a time-lapse video. So it allows you to capture a stabilized time-lapse video while you move about a scene. This compares to a standard time-lapse video, which is not stabilized. If I'm shooting in time warp, I'm usually shooting in 16:9, 4K, linear with horizon lock, auto speed, schedule capture off, duration no limit, timer off, zoom 1, and pretty much everything else in auto. But again, I'll usually tweak the sharpness to be low rather than medium. Now next up, we have star trails, light painting, and vehicle lights. These are all night time lapses, and the settings here are pretty similar. There aren't many settings that I would honestly tweak, but starting with star trails, you've got your framing, 16:9 or 8:7. I usually choose 8:7 and usually 4K, but sometimes 5K. But I like to shoot in a wide digital lens whenever I'm doing a night sky because I want to have as much in my frame as possible. Now the cool thing about star trails especially is that you don't have to have super pitch black conditions. You can shoot in relatively bright city light conditions as long as you have a clear sky. Now for trail length, you have the option of short, long, or max. You've got examples here to show you the effects. This is definitely to taste, but I like to have them at max. Now shutter is another setting worth experimenting with. It can be as long as 30 seconds or as short as half a second. You want to adjust this based on how dark your shooting conditions are. So you'll have to experiment to figure out which one works best. Schedule capture and duration can also be helpful to set if you want to leave your camera out and set it up to shoot for a set period of time when you're not there. And I also think a timer of at least 3 seconds is good to set so that there's no shake in the footage whenever you press the record button. Finally, if you want to set the ISO minimum and maximum, you can do that here in the Protune settings. This affects the brightness of your image. So the higher the ISO, the brighter the shot, but the more noise or grain you'll get. So it's usually best to leave the ISO as low as possible, and only increase it if your resulting shot is too dark. Next is light painting, which uses a light source with movement to create a design in the dark. The maximum shutter time in this mode is 2 seconds, so you'll want to utilize the timer function or voice control to use this feature if you're shooting by yourself. Other than that, I would use pretty much all of the same settings from Star Trails. And finally, we have vehicle lights, which can capture vehicles moving through an image like this. And my settings here are also very similar to the Star Trails settings. Now the last two presets here are time-lapse and night-lapse. And the main difference is that one would be used during the day and the other when it's dark out. Now for both of these presets, you can choose between photo format and video format. I personally prefer video, but if you'd like to make the time-lapse yourself, you can select photos. But just be aware that you'll end up with hundreds or even thousands of photos that you'll have to stitch together into time-lapse on your own. Now similar to time-lapse settings, I like to shoot in 8:7 and also 4K, or in this case 5K, don't have a choice, and also in wide. The interval is the only other setting that you may want to tweak. This tells the camera how often to take a shot. And in night-lapse mode, you can actually choose an interval of auto, or you can specify intervals as short as half a second or as long as 60 minutes. In most cases, you'll probably want an interval of between half a second, 1 second, or even 2 seconds. But again, you'll really have to experiment with the results to see which one is going to work best for you. Well, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, then please give it a like, share, and subscribe for more action camera content. If you want to see more GoPro videos, then you might find this accessory guide useful to watch next.